Hey guys, welcome to week 5 of Afternoon Adventures. We have some exciting adventures for you this week, and I am really pumped up to go to some new places with you to learn some new things. All this week's adventures are sponsored by Prodigy Learning Center here in College Station. They're an educational, dual language childcare center seeking to provide a nurturing and engaging environment for children ages 6 weeks to 12 years old. Check them out on Facebook at Prodigy Learning Center. All right, it's time to go on another afternoon adventure.
Howdy folks, and welcome to the Camel Farm. My name is Doug Baum, and on our farm, we've got camels. Our farm is probably a whole lot like most other farms in Central Texas. We have sheep, we have goats, we have cows, we have donkeys and horses and chickens and 2 dogs and too many cats. But I make a living with our family's 9 camels. What do I do with camels? Well, one of the most fun things I do is to guide camel treks out in the Big Bend region of West Texas along the border of Mexico. Think of like a trail ride with horses, but on camels. And there's actually a historical precedent for this. Back in the 1850s, the U.S. Army used camels as pack animals. Another part of my business with our family's camels is traveling to schools, libraries, historical sites, museums, or providing distance learning programs like this one. Take our camels straight into the classroom, or in this case, into your living room, telling the story about the Army camels 160 years ago. At Christmas time, our camels also participate in live nativities. You may go to a church and see the Magi riding our camels, or maybe the camels are just standing out on the front lawn of a church. It's another part of what we do. Today here, I got 2 of our 9 camels. I thought I'd introduce them to you. First, we've got nearly 8-year-old Jadid. Jadid is an Arabian camel. That's the 1-hump variety. And over here, this is Shion. Shion's a Bactrian camel. That's the 2-hump variety. We're going to learn the differences in both camels, what makes one different from another, and we're going to talk about some of the neat adaptations that camels have for life in the deserts of the world where you find camels. So let's dig right in, all right? Camels live in arid environments, and I don't want you to confuse deserts and arid environments for always meaning hot. As we're going to learn here in a little bit, some deserts are cold, all right? But we're going to start with Jadid here. We call him an Arabian camel, the 1-hump variety, and you find those in the world in places like the Sahara, in North Africa, or the Middle East, and parts of Asia like India. It's only once you cross the Himalayas into Central Asia that you find the 2-hump camel, Bactrian camels. And their environments, their habitats are pretty different. Most folks think of deserts as huge expanses of sand dunes, but the reality is only 30% of the world's deserts are sandy. The other 70% really rocky, mountainous. So camels have to be adapted for life in that kind of a habitat, all right? Be it sand or rock, mountains, etc. The camels that we have here on our farm were all born here in America. They're used to living in America. They're pretty happy, especially in the springtime like now. We've got all this beautiful green grass. It fills their belly up, saves us a little bit of money on hay. By the time summer comes around, though, you can bet most of Texas seems like a desert, and the camels are probably a little more at home, you might think. So let's talk about these adaptations. I like to say that everything on a camel, from its nose to its tail, is perfectly built for where they live. Since Shion's kneeling down, why don't we use him as our example? Come on, get closer. For those of you watching at home, I want you to imagine a windy day in the desert where there's a sandstorm. How would you protect yourself? Maybe get a bandana, cover your nose and your mouth, maybe put on goggles. Camels can't do that. So nature has adapted them in such a way all around their head where you don't have to worry, if you're a camel, about getting sand inside anywhere. Your ears, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, any of those places. Look closely. Inside the ear, there's really fine hair. This hair here keeps sand from getting inside. Their eyes, of course, they've got eyelashes just like you and I do on top and bottom, but they've got an extra set right here that filters sand and that keeps it from getting inside the eye. Their floppy lips can shut down tight. That keeps sand from getting inside the mouth. Then their nostrils. This is really probably one of the more unique or well-known features of a camel, and it is those nostrils that can open and close automatically to keep sand out. He doesn't need my help opening and closing his nose. He can do it all on his own. Now, when there's a sandstorm, a camel doesn't shut his nose down so tightly that he can't breathe. Of course, he's able to breathe, but it'll be tight enough that the sand doesn't get in, but he can breathe. So those are just some of the features about a camel that make them so perfectly adapted for life in deserts. Now, here in Texas, it's springtime, so it's starting to get warm. And you could be excused if you were thinking that, wow, this thick hair must be really hot in Texas. It is. So they shed. Every summer, all of this hair falls out, just like your dog or cat at home. We use maybe a brush to brush it out, but it comes out easily, just pulling it by hand. You can get a handful of it. And of course, nomadic people, for thousands of years living with camels, have been able to take that hair and they can spin it into thread or yarn, and then they can make various textiles like rope or clothing or maybe woolen panels for their tents. So the camel is a very useful animal for folks. They've been domesticated for 5,000 years. Camels are like horses or sheep or goats or cows. They serve man, so they're considered domesticated animals. They're not wild animals. The hair is one way that camels can serve man. Of course, you can ride them, you can pack your gear on them if you're a nomadic type person. People do eat camels in parts of the world, and a lot of people where camels live even milk them and drink their milk. So it's a very, very useful animal. And of course, they're perfectly adapted for life in these desert places. Not just their head, but even that long neck. Let's imagine that Shion were standing up. He could reach way up into this tree. That long neck allows him to reach up, but it also allows a camel to reach down. You might find a few trees in the desert, so that's handy to have that long neck to reach up to leaves, but you also find little tufts of grass or maybe weeds or brush, and it's good to have that long neck to reach down to the ground and eat as well. Now, the long neck actually works in concert or in tandem with long legs. Let's look at Jadid's long legs. Those long legs help to keep his body way up off the ground. On a hot day in the summer, you can imagine, let's just say it's 100 degrees. That's ambient temperature, the air temperature. Well, the ground, because it's solid, and solids retain heat, all right, that's science. The ground temperature on a 100-degree day might be 120 or even 130. So really, really hot. These long legs, thusly, keep the body up off the ground. You might imagine it kind of like that hot day in the summertime when you jump in the swimming pool or the lake or the river and that cold water hits your chest and you shiver. If your torso, if your chest is cooled down, then everything is cooled down. So the long legs on the camels really help in that regard. We've talked about his neck, we've talked about the various features of their head, but probably the most unique feature of a camel that people really fixate on, but maybe don't quite understand, is the hump. Again, one hump if it's an Arabian, two humps if it's a Bactrian camel. Now, what is the difference between the one hump and two humps of a camel? They're two different species of animal. You might imagine a lion and a tiger are both cats, but they're different species of cats. Well, the Arabian camel and the Bactrian camel are both camels, but they're different species of camels. And again, where they live varies, all right? Bactrian camels you find in Central Asia. Arabian camels you're gonna find in North Africa. You're gonna find them in the Middle East and again, parts of Asia like India. There are about 15 million Arabian camels in the world and about 5 million Bactrian camels. Interesting story, when the U.S. Army used camels here in the 1850s, they used both types. They had about 65 Arabian and 10 or a dozen of the Bactrian, the two-hump camels. Both camels are perfectly at home right here in Texas. I think probably they think they're at a buffet, all right? Everything that grows in Texas, they can eat. That's another great adaptation about a camel, is that it doesn't matter what kind of desert plant it is, whether it's thorny or whether it's high in salt or maybe even has a little bit of poison like toxicity. Camels can eat almost anything that grows. The way they're able to do that is that there are enzymes in their saliva. So when camels eat things that are slightly toxic, that enzyme in their saliva breaks down those toxins before it gets in their bloodstream. Another really cool but kind of gross feature about camels, the inside of their mouth. It's lined with a special skin called papilla, and those papilla have very little nerves. It's like if I reach and pinch you, it hurts because you've got nerves. But inside a camel's mouth, almost no nerves. Let's take a closer look. Imagine all animals, all plants, all living creatures are adapted for where they live. So a camel's adapted for life in the desert, but the plants in the desert are adapted too. They don't want wildlife or camels coming to eat them. So a lot of animals, or a lot of plants rather, have developed thorns to keep animals from eating them. But that's not a problem for a camel. Shion and all our camels love cactus, and it's no problem. They can reach down and take a whole mouthful, just like you're eating birthday cake. The way they do it, again, is that special lining I'm going to show you on the inside of their mouth, the papilla, all right? So let's look closely. Come on in. I want you to look on the inside of Shion's mouth. You see those little purple things that look like fingers? Those are papilla, and they have almost no nerves whatsoever. So when a camel takes a big bite of cactus, it doesn't hurt a bit. And what happens with all of that food and the water that camels drink? It goes in their belly. Storybooks and cartoons and maybe even your parents or teachers tell you that there's water inside a camel's hump. Not true. The only thing inside a camel's hump, whether it's an Arabian camel, the one-hump type, or a two-hump camel, the Bactrian, is fat. The cool thing about being a camel, they don't get fat here in places that people get it. They only get it inside their humps. All right, again, one hump, if it's an Arabian camel, listen closely, there's no water in there. I shake it, you don't hear water sloshing around. It's all fat. And on the Bactrian camel, you can look closely at those two humps. Those two humps right there are filled with fat. So why would a Bactrian camel need two humps? The real answer is in its environment. Sure, camels live off the fat that's in their humps if they have to go without food and water, but there's a second really important job that the fat inside the camel's humps can do for camels. Imagine a day in the desert, sun's shining all day long. That hump is absorbing heat, energy from the sun. Then at night, when the temperature cools down in the desert, the heat from those humps spreads throughout their body. So what does that tell us about the climate or the environment, the habitat that two-hump camels live in? It's a much colder place. And that's true for half of the year. Remember, in the summertime, it's super hot in Central Asia, so all of this hair sheds out. But in the wintertime, a Bactrian camel needs that thick hair to stay warm. They also need the two humps because it's super cold in Central Asia in the wintertime. So they've got two heat sources rather than just the one that you would see in an Arabian camel. Now these camels have never ever lived in a true desert. They were born here in America. We've got them ranging in age from about 5 years old up to 29. A lot of folks ask, how long can a camel live? 30 to 35 is a good life for a camel. Our youngest here, Dalil, is 5 years old. He was born right here on our farm, and he represents a fourth generation of camels on our farm. We've got his aunt, of course we had his mom, we even had his grandma who lived to be right around 30 years old. So Dalil is family, just like all of our camels are family. And we love sharing them, whether we go to a school, whether we visit you online like this. So we thank you for your time. We appreciate you tuning in today, and we're super honored to be asked to be a part of this afternoon adventure. Moms, dads, teachers, if you're interested in what we do, you can visit me online. Email me directly at texascamelcorps@gmail.com. That's Texas, like the state, camel, like the animal, corps, CORPS, @gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Y'all have a super day.